My name is Manousos Oviedo. I am not one of them. I wish to save the world.
Hola.
After almost dying to get to her, Manousos has finally made it to Carol, but things don't go too well at all for the two, so much so that Carol joins the others in leaving him behind after his methods scare Carol and the others. In this finale, we see Carol completely lets herself fall into the illusion of the other's happiness until she learns the truth. I can't believe it's been 9 weeks, but we've made it to the end of this story. So with all that being said, let's dive into this finale and discuss that ending and break down the themes of identity, love, and betrayal, and what happens when the people you claim to care about have a hidden agenda. Full spoilers ahead. It is day 71, hour 13, 31 minutes and 29 seconds, 11 days from where we last ended episode 8. We skip ahead in time to find a plane in the sky flying above, and with it, the return of one of the most quietly compelling characters of the show, and that is Kusamayu. Now, she's not alone, unlike Carol was at one point in Manousos. She's with her aunt and cousin, the same family members we met way back in episode 2 when Kusamayu first shared her desire to belong with the others. Back then, she was the only one in her village not a part of the collective. She was an outsider, the one watching everyone else move in unison, but now, on this big day, they've made her favorite lunch and celebration before the transformation begins. It's here that we learn that the plane in the sky at the start of this episode is a part of Kusamayu's big day. Now, as I predicted back in episode 6, that she would and has decided to become a part of the hive mind. She tells her aunt and cousin that she's excited, but sweeping the same spot for a half an hour and the look on her face says otherwise. Is this a look of anticipation? Is this a look of someone who's fearful? Maybe it's both, as she looks confused about the fact that she's about to join and lose her individuality. Now, that same plane that we opened the episode with is now landing, and we see a sealed container is being transferred. It's being handed off like it's a sacred relic, and it's headed straight to Kusumayu's village. Now, back at her village, we see that her aunt is singing to her this soft chant that feels both comforting and eerie as the ritual is about to begin. Now, as the virus arrives, we get our Severance crossover moment here with Kusumayu holding and petting a baby goat, if you know you know, for my Severance fans out there, as they tell her to not be afraid, which she claims that she isn't. As she's now surrounded by her village, whom all proceed to sing that same chant, she asks if this is going to hurt, which they reply by telling her it won't hurt one bit. They promise to never hurt her. Now, as the container opens, we see Kusamayu inhales the virus, and just like the others, there's no pain. She begins to feel its effects, just like everyone else did back in episode 1, and within seconds, Kusamayu is now a part of the others. As her and all the villagers can now move on because she is now one of them and there's no need to occupy this place anymore. Now we watch as she walks away from her old home and from the life that she once knew as an individual, and as she does this, she frees all the animals. All the chickens, the goats, the roosters, but one in particular animal stands out. It's the black and white baby goat, the one that she held onto not too long ago, as it's screaming and it charges towards her, bleeding like it knows something's wrong as she is now gone. That last shot of the baby goat running and screaming was definitely sad to watch, but it's also very symbolic. To me, that goat was the only one of its kind, just like Kusamayu was the only one that was uninfected. And just like that baby goat, Kusamayo was innocent, she was different, she was also loved, and now enjoying the hive, she's lost that uniqueness. Now, back when we first met her in episode 2, she made it clear that she wanted to join her family, and when an opportunity came, she took advantage of it, and it was essentially inevitable. This whole opening scene felt very cultish, but also religious at the same time. It also felt like we were watching someone's baptism and their funeral as she ultimately decided to give up her life to join the others and thinking it was the only and best thing for her to do. It does make me wonder, besides Lexmi and Kumba, what did the others unaffected do with this opportunity? I wonder if they're going to want to stay human by choice, or like Kusamayu, where they eventually fold, and not by force, but from loneliness and wanting to join their loved ones as a part of the collective. Now back at Carol's, we find her and Zosha watching a live drone footage of Manousos, who's about 2 hours away from arriving. Now Zosha and the others plan to not be present when he arrives, as Carol learns that he's considered a danger to the others and Zosha, but not necessarily towards Carol. It is now day 60, hour 16, 40 minutes and 17 seconds, 8 hours after learning that she'll be getting a visitor, and after weeks and months of traveling and almost dying in doing so, Manousos arrives outside of Carol's house as he practices what he's going to say to Carol for the very first time in person. Now, after honking his horn, which, by the way, I wonder what Carol thinks of car horns after what we learned about what she thinks about train horns, as we see Carol opens her front door. From cursing each other out on the phone to this very moment, now face to face after all that time. Now we watch as they reintroduce themselves, and it's met with awkwardness, and it's also met with some tension, but they say they're ready to talk. But first, Carol makes him leave his machete in the ambulance after learning that he may be dangerous. Now Manousos wants to talk in the back of the ambulance, but Carol wants to talk inside her house, as this is just the beginning of their misunderstandings, as we get this great shot of the space, or better yet, the gap between the two characters. Now Carol goes inside to get her phone to use as a translator. But Manousos grabs her phone and he thinks that the others are listening and that they'll hear their plan, and before she can explain why they won't do this, he tosses her phone into the sewer. Now obviously this upsets Carol, and I thought this moment was hilarious as she tells him to leave and her phone is still translating from the sewer as we watch her walk back into her house. Now knowing that didn't work, we see Manousos is going to take a different approach as he gets her phone from the sewer, and he's going to compromise. He agrees to not talk in the back of the ambulance and to use her phone to translate, but he's also going to need an umbrella. Now outside of Carol's backyard, behind her fence, they have a conversation. Carol refuses to join him under the umbrella as he believes, as he calls it, the others are being weirdos, have eyes from space that can read their lips. Now they have a back and forth, and Carol insists on going inside the house where he believes the others have bugged her house to spy on her, as he demands privacy, secrecy, and cover, and then we watch as he questions why the others would help. Notice he says that he doesn't see them as humans, as he continues to say, why would they have them join together to destroy the others? He calls them evil and soul takers, and if they can't be fixed, they're better off dead. Definitely some interesting choice of words by Manousos. Now, they disagree on the others being humans, as Carol agrees they are weird, yes, but still humans no less. Now, it's here that he brings the question, why did the others leave her for 40 days but ultimately decide to come back, as Carol lies and says that she doesn't know. Now, clearly she's afraid to say what really happened and how she now is in a relationship with one of them. Carol now feeling the heat from both Manousos and the weather, as she's had enough and heads inside and he follows. Now inside, we watch as he checks around her living room to check to see if there's any spy microphones, as he snaps at Carol to use her phone, and boy, she did not like that. Man, I knew after their first conversation that when they eventually met that there was going to be some awkwardness and some tension and maybe some anxiety between the two, and so far, they have not disappointed. Now, to loosen the tension in the air, we see Carol prepares a drink for the both of them, but Manousos pushes her aside and heads straight towards the liquor cabinet as he finds something hidden in the corner. Carol immediately calls Zosha, questioning if she or one of the others have been spying on her, as she eventually finds out it was a sensor planted by Helen back in 2011 when she froze her eggs. Now we all know that Carol likes to have a drink or two, and so did Helen, and she was the one that planted that sensor to monitor how often Carol drank, and most likely thought, let's hold off on having kids since she has a full control over her drinking. This little moment continues to show us that the woman Carol thought understood her, the woman whose memory that she's been clinging to, and suddenly Carol's starting to realize that Helen didn't necessarily trust her. She maybe also didn't really believe in her. At least not fully. Again, going back to when Carol found out that Helen wasn't necessarily a fan of her books, to now this very moment, Carol is learning a lot about her deceased wife that puts a lot of what Carol thought about her in a much different light. As we watch, she quietly hangs up the phone with Zosha. Now, after all the back and forth and distrust, we see Carol is exhausted and emotionally drained by her visitor as she shows him where he'll be sleeping for the night and is not in her house. As they have to put the saving to the world on hold till tomorrow, we watch as she takes him over to her neighbor's place. Now, initially, he disapproves of staying here at first because, as we know, he doesn't like to take things from others or things that don't belong to him, but we see that he takes it for now. Now, as Carol leaves, we see that Manousos calls the others and requests to speak to the person that she spoke to on the phone moments ago, and that was Zosha. It's now nighttime and Carol's falling asleep to the Golden Girls. As she wakes up and she secures the front door just in case Manousos is as dangerous as they think he is. But when she does that, she notices that Zosha's car outside and she runs over to the neighbor's house. We watch as Carol rushes in and learns that Zosha has told him everything, most likely about their relationship, the other's eating source, their ways of communicating with one another, and more importantly, their weaknesses. As Carol grabs Zosha and has them leave immediately as he calls the others yet again and requests they send him another one. Now back at Carol, she learns that Zosha did tell him everything that he wanted to know. Now behind Carol, you can see car lights of one of the others approaching during this conversation as Zosha tells Carol that the others, including herself, loves Manousos just as much as they love Carol. Now Carol doesn't understand. How could the others, including Zosha, love someone who doesn't love them back, who's been avoiding them, who hates them, who wants them all dead? And how could Zosha love him, especially now considering that Carol considers Zosha to be hers? Now, as Carol goes on and on about the things that he said about the others, but also having this level of concern that he knows everything, we see Zosha lays on the floor and apologizes for what's about to happen. Now, Carol's confused because she knows that she didn't yell or get upset with the others, but yet another one of my theories comes true as Zosha goes into a seizure like we saw back in episode 2 as Carol realizes that it's Manouso that is doing this. She runs over to her neighbor's house to find the Manousos next to one of the hive mind members after learning everything from Zosha, and he's basically experimenting on them. Now, Manousos goes to grab his notebook and pulls out his handheld radio and tunes into the channel of 86130, and the sound this time around is much different than before, indicating that a change is happening in the frequency. Now, he heads back inside, and the sound goes back to when we first heard it weeks ago, and the other, who's on the couch, comes to, only for Manousos to yell at him again and sends him back into a seizure, and the frequency changes sounds again. Carol leaves to go get something to stop him after seeing just how dangerous he is and how he can be so dangerous towards the others. Now, of course, while Carol had did this back in episode 2 to the others, we never saw her do it again after learning how many people died when she does this. Now, I would assume that Manousos learned how many people die when they have seizures, but as he'll tell Carol later, he doesn't care because he doesn't see them as humans. As the saying goes, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, or in this case, you have to kill millions in order to save billions. Now, Manousos goes up to the other's ear, and this person was once known as Rick, as he tells Rick that he knows that the real Rick is still in there inside and he wants to help him. Knowing that he doesn't have much time before the sound waves come back, he continues to essentially wake up the real Rick to return to himself, but Carol returns with a shotgun and shoots above Manousos' head and tells him to back away from Rick. Okay, we gotta talk about this scene. Do you all believe that if Manousos had more time that he could have or would have found a way to get Rick back to himself? Now, this obviously answers the question or the theory that we all had back when we were first introduced to this frequency, that this sound does indeed tie into the hive mind and how they communicate with one another. That was just confirmed. Now, the question is, where exactly is the location of the source of the hive mind? Now, obviously, besides coming from space, is this tied to the antennas from where the astronomers detected the original radio signal from space, or is it somewhere else? Either way, this discovery is huge, and the seeds of the signal being important has been there throughout this entire season, and I would imagine will be very important for Carol and Manousos in season 2, as we'll discuss much later in this breakdown. But let's switch gears, because while Manousos chases control, we see Carol chooses connection. Back at Carol, Zosha awakes but is in a little bit of discomfort as the phone rings. Notice Zosha refers to herself again as we and us after what just happened, but quickly assures Carol that she'll be fine. Carol knows who's on the phone and she still answers it, and it's Lakshmi, who of course is blaming her for what just happened to the others based on their past times of what happened before, when Carol would be the one getting upset.
Screw you too, Lakshmi.
Now, after what just happened, the others, like before, must leave again and distance themselves from Manousos, similar to what they did with Carol when they deemed her to be too dangerous to be around. Man, talk about not meeting your heroes, am I right? This once exciting but dangerous trip to save the world has become a disaster for Manousos and Carol. Now we see that Carol put him in a trunk as she ultimately lets him out. He doesn't feel bad about what he did because, again, he doesn't see them as humans, and what he learned was very valuable in his little experiment. The real work must begin, and he's ready to fix things with Carol, but after last week and after thinking that she might lose Zosha, we see that she's fully turned a new page, and she lets him know that there is plenty of water and power that he can live on as she gets into her car. Now, before pulling off, it's here that we get that Leo meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moment. As we hear the translation of what the title of this episode means,
do you want to save the world or get the girl?
As Carol drives off to get her girl. Looking back at this decision by Carol, this is it. This is it for Carol. It's no longer about saving the world. It's about saving this new love that she's recently found and cherishing it. Now, as here we flash forward to getting this gorgeous montage of Zosha and Carol traveling around the world. In this, we see them laughing, living, Zosha swimming, they're taking a walk on the beach, and for the very first time, we see Zosha's wearing yellow. As we talked about many times on these breakdowns, that yellow is Carol's color. To me, that color has always represented her individuality. And now, it's theirs that they share. We see them in the tub together, sipping tea, just being no we or us or I, just them with no fear, just enjoying each other's company and enjoying the joy that they're sharing together. These little moments of happiness of Carol enjoying every single second with Zosha has reminded her of the time she shared with Helen, but this time around, she can fully embrace her love without limitations, which makes this the happiest that we've seen her in this entire series. Now, to back up a bit, we did get this shot of Carol reading the 1969 novel by the name of The Left Hand of Darkness. Now, I wasn't too familiar with this book, but after looking it up, it's considered by many as a classic science fiction novel. It's about gender, identity, and human connection. Now, as we know at this point in the show, her reading this isn't just some throwaway detail. Carol is trying to understand the hive mind more and making herself feel more connected to them, but also thinking about her being with Zosha as her joining them in a way, and to also keeping this relationship and this connection that she and Zosha has. But even beyond trying to understand the hive mind, I also think this is Carol also trying to understand and to make a connection of how she can exist without losing herself. Can she be a part of something greater? Can she still be Carol? Now, we arrive at this ski location, which almost reminded me where we found Carol and Helen on their ice trip in Norway, and similar to that time, despite all the joy and happiness, we find Carol isn't 100% happy. Despite the connection, despite Zosha being by her side, Carol is still searching, still questioning. Now, you'll also notice that Carol is now wearing blue, which happens to be the color that we've seen the others wear throughout the most of this season, and even the color of the car that Zosha drove. A subtle yet powerful visual cue that Carol is changing and she's aligning. Now, Zosha can sense that something's bothering Carol. Now, Carol quickly switches topics and wants to know about the unjoined Zosha's romantic past, as she learns that whoever that person was has passed at some point. I do wonder if unjoined Zosha was romantically involved with a male or female. Now, earlier I had mentioned Severance, which again, one of my favorite shows of all time, and if you guys aren't watching that, what are you doing? But as I digress, I had mentioned Severance earlier, and this question made me think about Irving and his relationship with Bert, and if the unsevered Irv was ever in a romantic relationship with a man before severed Irv was with Bert. Now, Carol mentions to Zosha that she struggles with feeling happy like the others and asks Zosha what makes a person happy, as we watch Zosha rattles off some scientific facts about what makes a person happy. Now, Carol explains the feeling that she has about this happiness with Zosha coming and going, but ultimately, she admits to never wanting it to end, but here is where Zosha tells her that it'll only get better. Now, as Carol alluded to last week, and we spoke about this in last week's breakdown, while spending all this time with Carol probably came from a place of love and affection from the others in Zosha, at the same time, they were basically distracting her from the fact that they were still working on a way to change her into one of them, as the weeks-long theory that we've discussed now comes into fruition. Taking a look at Carol's face in this moment is a look of a person that feels defeated and is devastated, as we see this moment of betrayal on her face, and she thought that she was being seen, that she thought she was being loved, but instead she was being studied, she was being prepared, just like the scene from last week's episode at the diner. as she now knows that the others have her eggs, and with them, they can now extract the stem cells to complete the transformation. Now, Zosha tries to explain why they have to share this gift with her and the others that are uninfected, as she also tells her that Kushimayu just joined them, which lets us know as far as time goes that this is taking place at the same time at the start of this episode, and that this mini trip between Karol and Zosha was about 10 days long. Now, Karol learns that it'll take a month at the earliest and no more than 2 to 3 months at the latest to complete this task and changing Karol into one of them. This is where the romantic happy illusion comes to an end, as Karol realizes that the others will forever be there to protect her, but they'll also be there to want her to join them no matter what she does or says. You know, thinking about Karol and her struggles throughout this season, I know there's a lot of people that don't really necessarily care for Karol. They don't really have a emotional attachment to the character. Me, I'm the complete opposite. Like, I've really enjoyed this journey. But I think even the people that don't like Karol has to feel something for her in this moment. Like, you guys have to have some emotional weight on how devastating that had to be for Karol. Let me know how you all felt about that moment in the comments below. As we come to the end of this episode and this finale of season 1, it is now day 74, hour 18, 30 minutes and 23 seconds. 4 days after learning her time with Zosha came with a hidden agenda, we find Manousos still working hard at figuring out how to fix things. He's been doing some research on electromagnetics, crystallology, radio signals, learning what he can and studying all the things tied to the radio signal. Now, we see him taking notes on electric flow and reading about standing waves, which by definition is a vibration of a system in which some particular points remain fixed, while others between them vibrate with a maximum amplitude. Now, in his research, it describes it by mentioning antennas and radio frequency generators or transmitters, and how at a certain points, if separated by distance, the output would be affected and reduced to zero. Now, in layman terms, I would assume that this all means that the further you're away from the main source, as we saw, or you disrupt the source, as we saw in this episode with Rick, in theory, I would believe that Manousos believes that he can get the original person out of the hive mind if they're separated from that main radio source. Now, as he writes down loop equals circuit, he hears a helicopter approaching. As it starts to land, we see that it's Zosha and Karol as a large container is being placed in front of Karol's driveway. You know, seeing this moment is kind of ironic. Last we saw Zosha flying, it was for her meeting Karol for the first time. But as we are now in the finale, she's dropping her off, and this may be the last time, or at least the last time she's going to see Karol for a very long time. Now, before leaving the helicopter, there are no words between the two, but a look that says more than words can express, as they both know that this is it, and the last time there will be trust from Karol. And I feel like at the very least that Karol wished that things could have been different, and who knows, maybe deep down Zosha and the others wish the same. Now, bringing up our color theory conversation again, I think the fact that Karol is wearing mostly black speaks to her current mindset. Knowing how important color is to this show, black can represent mourning, darkness, self-control, discipline, independence, and a strong will, and giving an impression of authority and power. In this case, this is Karol regaining all that, but also mourning the loss of the others in Zosha. As Karol watches Zosha leave, she takes a deep breath and looks at Manousos and tells him that he won and she'll now help him in saving the world. As she walks inside, we see Manousos ask her what's inside the container, as we get this great call back to the conversation that Karol had with the DHL guy, as she tells him that it's an atom bomb, and as we see the camera pans up, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last shot in the very end of season 1 of Pluribus. Yep, a whole ass nuclear weapon is now in front of Karol's house and next to the most dangerous person in Manousos. Now, do I think Karol wants to actually use this? Not necessarily, but maybe. But deep down, I personally feel this is more of a sign for her saying to the others to never return, or else she might be willing to use it. Which, speaking of using it, I mean, hell, she might use the atomic bomb to blow up a whole state of others to send them a message, or she might use it to blow up their giant antenna that they want to use to send out the signal to everyone across the universe. Now, let's talk about this finale, because there was a lot to take away from this finale, and for me, it's mostly positive. First thing I want to mention is seeing Manousos sharing scenes with Karol and Zosha was fantastic. The fact that they all have different personalities, obviously, and different perspectives, and they come from different journeys and walks of life, their particular scenes were just so unique to me. Now, the moments between Manousos and Carol may have been my favorite parts in this finale. Their back and forth and the tension and distrust that they had with one another, and seeing Carol telling him that he won at the end and now wants to join him was such an earned moment for me. And speaking of Carol, I shared my prediction last week and it basically came true, but I still love seeing it and how it was all executed. From her being on the other side at the beginning and calling them human and leaving humanity alone, and then to spend that time with Zosha and feeling more and more in love with her. But then her finding out about her eggs and being brought back down to square one and wanting to save the world was such a great full circle arc for her in this episode and for her throughout this season. Now, if I had one major issue with this finale is that, selfishly, I wish we had more scenes between the actors and more scenes between Zosha and Manousos and actually seeing the conversation between the two. I also would have loved to have seen Carol demanding that they get her that atom bomb and watching them get the atom bomb and Carol not changing her mind about it. Other than that, the worst part for me in this finale is the fact that the show has officially come to an end. And based on a recent interview I saw with Vince Gilligan and the other writers and creators of the show, I don't know, guys. It sounds like we might have to wait at least 3 years between this season and next. Now, to be clear, I always prefer for creators, writers, directors, storytellers to have as much time as possible to make the best story as possible. But if I'm being honest with you all, at the same time, I feel like he's had so much time from when this show was originated and conceived to when season 1 writer's room came together and to we get this very finale. I feel like there was enough time for them to come up with the storyboards, come up with actual stories for season 2 to be complete as far as the writers are concerned. And again, based on the interview I saw, it sounded like there's going to be a possible 2026 shoot date. And at the earliest, especially knowing the scope and scale, even though this doesn't have like a big cast, but we know how much they use different locations across the world, and this is a pretty big show, I would imagine maybe at the earliest we'll get this show maybe late 2027 or as early as the early parts of 2028. I don't know, guys. We might have to wait a while before we get season 2. Which, speaking of season 2, I would imagine that we'll get a lot more of Carol and Manousos working together and maybe more from the other uninfected characters in the show and seeing how the others will try to prevent them from changing them. Of course, I anticipate us getting more information about the radio signal, us learning more about the, I'm assuming, aliens that set up the original signal. So I would anticipate we'll get more answers and also probably some other cool cameos, not just John Cena, but again, maybe we'll get some characters from the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul universe that makes their way into the show when it comes to season 2. Now, as far as the season goes, overall, I've said this throughout the 9 weeks, but I really enjoyed this show with little to no major issues along the way. I loved how each episode was essentially its own genre in a way, and I also really enjoyed the self-awareness of the show. Like, it never got too serious, it never got too dark. It reminded itself to add in some moments of levity between these more heavy topics that the show did cover. Now, I do wish that we could have recaptured or at least had more episodes that felt like episode 1, because I'm such a lover of science fiction and horror, and that first episode was just perfect to me, and I wish we could have recaptured that type of genre and that type of emotion and the stakes that first episode had. But besides that, this was easily one of my favorite shows of this year. From the writing, the acting from everyone, including our main 3 characters, and especially our main lead with Rhea Seehorn, who really got to show off her acting abilities in this show. Manousos was fantastic. I really enjoyed how he was included in this back half of the season. I'm really excited to see more of him. I love Zosha. The actress is so phenomenal. Her personality, the little moments of humanity that she let come out was beautiful to watch between her and Carol. Which, speaking of Carol, her own personal journey from the world's most miserable person to the world's most loneliest person to finding love to where she ended was just so compelling these past 9 weeks. Again, from the productional value, the use of color, the moments of silence, and the science to tell a deeply human story about connection, identity, and the cost of belonging, this show to me did not disappoint. Now, I've addressed the pacing issues before, but again, I leaned into the character-driven approach, and I love the more existential questions that the show poses each and every week in putting us as an audience into the shoes of our main character, Carol. Again, I didn't think this was a perfect show. It wasn't flawless. It's not my favorite show of the year. But with all that being said, I found it to be one of the better experiences that I had with a new show all year. And again, it will be in my top 10 of the year. But with all that said, to all my viewers and listeners out there, we have come to the end of this breakdown of season 1 finale of Pluribus. But now the $1 million question is, what did you all think? Number 1, what did you all think about the finale? What worked, what didn't work, what were some deeper meanings, some different understandings that you all had at certain moments? What was your favorite moment, your least favorite moment? What were some of your theories that came true, other theories that didn't come true? What do you all hope to see in the future as far as season 2? When do you all think we'll get season 2? And also just share your general thoughts about the season, favorite episodes, favorite character. What were some glaring issues you all had throughout the 9 episodes? What was the best thing about this show as a whole? Is this one of your favorite shows of the year? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Again, I want to thank you all for listening or watching this week's breakdown. I have had such an incredible time covering this show this past 9 weeks. It has been such an awesome experience, not only experiencing this show, but also reading you all's comments, you all supporting these videos, watching them, sharing them, all that great stuff does not go unnoticed on my end. So I do thank you all for the 9 weeks. We will be back. It's the end of the year, but we will have many things to look forward to in the new year. But before we wrap this thing up, to let me know that you all support the channel, support me as a creator, and you all are still listening or watching, this week's special word to put in the comments right now is #YouWin. Now, if you all enjoyed my breakdown, not only for this individual episode, but for the past 9 weeks, let me know by liking this video. And if you're watching this on YouTube, when you all hit the like button, there is a hype button, which will allow this video to come across some new viewers. Now, speaking of new viewers, if you all can do me a favor, hit the share button, man. It goes a long way. Share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And last but not least, even though this is the end of the road for Pluribus, stick around by subscribing to the channel today. We will be having some top 10 lists coming out soon. My favorite shows of the year, favorite movies of the year, favorite horror movies, superhero movies, what I'm looking forward to coming in the new year, and so many more things to come. So if that sounds like something you all will enjoy, like I said, stick around by subscribing to the channel today. Now, for all my podcast listeners out there, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor. Let me know your thoughts about everything we discuss in the comments section. Also, can you all consider sticking around by subscribing to the podcast, leaving me a like and a review? I would greatly appreciate the support. Alrighty, y'all, we have come to the end, so remember, you all are awesome. Stay safe out there, have a happy holidays, and also remember, never leave the baby goats behind. Alrighty, y'all, I'll see you again soon.